What's going on, everybody? This is the Reformation Keegan, and I'm here with another comic analysis. So, today we're going to be looking at a rather underrated story. We're going to be looking at Batman Venom, which was a part of the Legends of the Dark Knight and goes from issues 16 to 20. So, 5 issues, not really that long, pretty easy to get through, and a really, really fun story. So, I'm going to keep doing more of these analyses because they're a lot of fun to do. Hopefully we get more viewership going forward, and hopefully we can get to 1,000 subscribers because we're already at 500, so we're halfway there. And I think that we can get to 1,000 eventually. So that's a really big goal that I have. And I want to first go through the covers because I think the covers for Venom are great. Like, I love this cover. This is number 16. Number 17, which is a pretty popular cover nowadays. I think that cover looks pretty great. I think 18 looks great. This is where Bruce secludes himself for a month in order to beat his addiction, which I'm going to get to soon. I think 19 also looks great, and this particular segment in Venom was fantastic. Show a huge sense of desperation. And I think 20, this is a really, really nice cover as well. So we have all of these really, really great covers. I'm going to try to display them in a cool way, but we have them all basically right here to our disposal. So I think those look pretty great. But one of the things that I think Venom does well is it takes a concise story and basically adds intricacies to it. So I'm going to start off pretty quickly. I'm going to use some of my notes because there's quite a bit to discuss, but I'm going to try to keep this video a bit shorter just for, time purposes. But I think this story works really well for many reasons. So we start immediately with a conflict, and it's where Sissy dies after being kidnapped, and Batman doesn't possess the strength to lift the rock to save her. And as a result, Batman tears his shoulder trying to lift weights out of guilt. So Batman injures himself out of guilt because he could not save this poor girl who was kidnapped beyond her control. So there's a theme of guilt and innocence already from the get-go. And this is very realistic because when someone who has the power to save somebody doesn't have the power once, it's automatically a hindrance to their psyche. And I think that that's what is established right from the get-go with Venom. And I think that's what Dennis O'Neil does really good from the beginning, is establish that conflict. And what happens is he tries to lift out of guilt, and then eventually he goes back to Randolph Porter, who we would know to be the Venom distributor. And he tries his drug, which, again, we know is Venom, and that's what Bane ends up taking. So this shows ultimately Bruce's inconsistent emotional state that derives from guilt, but also derives from trauma, because a lot of traumatic instances lead to personal guilt, leads to guilt over a situation that someone thought they could have controlled, and even guilt towards other people. So, again, this is all within issue 16, the first issue. And then when you get to 17, we see the power of addiction, and we see how the power of addiction can take someone completely over almost systematically. So Alfred, he basically leaves. Not that he's necessarily had enough, but he can't stand to see Bruce in this way. And this shows a great characterization of Alfred, because Alfred is not just a butler. Alfred is Bruce's muse. He's Bruce's wise man. And without Alfred, as smart as Bruce is, Bruce doesn't have that guidance, because Bruce, even though he's an adult now, is still a kid. And he's still a kid in a lot of ways in the sense of emotional maturity, because due to the traumatic effects of losing his parents right in front of him, he's never fully recovered from that. but Alfred has always been his muse to talk him out of situations or talk him into situations that are going to benefit him. So Bruce talks to himself basically about losing Alfred. However, this new addiction that he's got to this Venom drug means more. So this shows how basically an addict will put a drug in their relationship with that drug over the relationships they have with other human beings and through familial relationships. And I think that's a huge theme that Dennis O'Neil, again, capitalizes on. And it's very rare to see Batman as an addict for any substances, but Batman is an addict for justice. And Batman is also an addict for redemption. So that's going to be a theme that happens a bit later on in this narrative. But right now, Batman is an addict for drugs, and aka Venom. And when Randolph says that Batman will have to earn his Venom in his order to kill Commissioner Gordon, Batman says, no sweat. So again, this is very out of character, but it also shows how Batman still has a very fragile psyche, which isn't an insult, but it's a fact. We look at Batman being used as a tool, like a weapon of mass destruction that disguises this new addiction. So what this shows is that addiction is a dependency, and it's also a tool to be used as basically a weapon for control, a weapon for power. And as this continues, we can see Porter and Timothy Slaycroft, they want Jim Gordon basically killed because he stands in the way of their research and their ability to expand. So this is a big thing in the drug world, right? Where if somebody stands in the way of further research and further financial gain, they're going to have to be taken out. So this is actually a very strong sense of realism that Dennis O'Neil uses. However, we can see in number 18 in Legends of the Dark Knight that Batman can't, in the end, bring himself to kill Jim Gordon, really much less anybody else. So he frantically calls Alfred to return and lock him away for a month with tears in his eyes. So this is Batman, again, punishing himself. Punishing himself, one, for caving into the drugs, but two, punishing himself for being guilty. So he's guilting himself into being guilty, which is, again, a huge thing in the mental health world. And this fact that he was not strong enough to lift that rock and save Sissy has put him in such a spiral that he became an addict for substances and became an addict for guilt. So this is really unique because Batman takes a whole month to be away and not even talk or see to anybody. Alfred would just go near the door that he was in but not come in, and Bruce would just be sitting in his own seclusion, almost like he was cleansing himself in solitude, which is, again, a huge thing in the mental health world, where a lot of people think that seclusion is your friend, and sometimes it can be, depending on who you are. And because Bruce was an only child and grew up alone, that independence is a benefit for him. So then too, like when we get to 20 in this story, we find out that there are really two main victims. There's Sissy and then there's Timmy Slaycroft. So Timmy serves as an example of parental and societal pressure. And he becomes a victim in a lot of ways of toxic masculinity. And he's trained by General Slaycroft to be, like how Batman was, a weapon of mass destruction and to operate in the image of someone else that wants to use him for material gain. So in a lot of ways in familial relationships, a lot of times between son and father, the father wants the son to be made in the image that he wants, but sometimes that's not always the right way to go. And we can see how these relationships develop and they become extremely unhealthy. So we see this through Timmy, where Timmy becomes a tragedy in himself, and Bruce is ultimately the one that triumphs. But the conclusion with Bruce basically guilting himself over Sissy and Timmy shows how human someone can be in rather inhumane situations. And plus, the drug race with Slaycroft and Porter, like I said a bit earlier, exudes this sense of realism that is all too common in our world today and was in yesteryear. So, one of the things that I really liked about Venom was you got to see how people were played as pawns. Timmy played as a pawn, and Batman played as a pawn. And even Porter, to an extent, was played as a pawn by Slaycroft too, because they have their own conflict, and that's what happens in the drug world too. Is people end up betraying each other for more gain and more power. So again, this was a very realistic story. That this is one that I think has gone under the radar, and I think that it should be read by everybody. Because again, even too, if you're somebody who struggles with substances, this is a really good story to read because it shows the effects of that dependency and how people and drugs are the ultimate rulers of the world. They're almost like two wonders of the world that work together, and then when they work together, it creates this very toxic combination that you see through 1 Slaycroft, 2 Porter, 3 Timmy, 4 Batman. And then Alfred is the exact antonym of everything I've said, where Alfred is almost pure. He's almost a symbol of purity and loyalty and love. So there was a lot of moving parts in Venom. And again, this is a story that I think you should read. I highly recommend doing so because O'Neill's prose is fantastic. The art is fantastic. And the messages are pretty fantastic. So I highly recommend Venom. And most of all, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'll be back with more relatively soon.